The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is taking the world by storm, and I'm definitely included in that. I've enjoyed myself a lot so far, but I'm far from anywhere near close enough to do a review, and in all honesty I probably shouldn't do a review. But this video is just a quick little rundown of my first impressions for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Getting out of the way now, there will be, I guess, kind of spoilers for the beginning tutorial section of the game. I'm not even that far in the game, but most of what you're going to see is going to be footage from the Sky Islands, and so it's not, I wouldn't consider it to be a spoiler to someone who's actively playing the game, but I guess if you want to go in completely blind, then that's worth mentioning. So first things first, I think it would be a good place to start off with my background with this series. Just being transparent, I am not a Legend of Zelda fan. I'm by no means a hater, but it's definitely not my go-to franchise. When it comes to Breath of the Wild, that's where everything changes. Everyone and their mom seems to love that game, and so it was one that I was like, okay, maybe I'll give it a try. And I tried it once and I didn't like it. Looking at it in retrospect, I think it's because I approached it as an action-adventure kind of open-world game. And it's not like any open world game you've ever played before, and I think that's kind of an important thing worth mentioning. It's just not like anything else. I gave it a second try actually earlier in this year where I recorded my reaction, and I enjoyed it a lot more because I switched my attitude and expectation from a, traditional Ubisoft style open world to just a survival game. So what I mean by that is, I think Breath of the Wild has more in common with a game like Minecraft than, say, something like Assassin's Creed. And once you have that context, I think it was, or at least once I had that context, I think it was a lot easier for me to get into the game. Now, with that said, 40 hours in, I did drop off the title. It was due to a couple reasons. The main reason was I was distracted by other games coming out. Hogwarts Legacy was the main one. Games like Breath of the Wild that are more open-ended, that's a strength and a weakness, at least for someone like me. With Breath of the Wild in particular, somewhat similar to Elden Ring, but different in a lot of ways, I got to the point where I struggled to find my where and why. So what I mean is, where is it that I'm supposed to go, and why am I doing what I'm doing? Now, the other area where I struggled with Breath of the Wild is the weapon durability. I know, I'm one of those people who did not love it. I didn't hate it, and I understand the idea behind it, but I just felt that for how much you're fighting that game and for how quickly things break, it just became a very frustrating loop, especially considering how small your inventory is. So, to me, Breath of the Wild was more like an 8 out of 10 kind of game. Like, I like it a lot, and I appreciate it, but I liked it and I didn't love it the same way that a lot of people loved that game. I still enjoyed it enough. I wanted to give this sequel a try. So far, my first impressions are wow. I was immediately impressed by the Sky Islands. These islands are very well crafted and they're actually quite large. The intro area section is a lot bigger than I anticipated it to be, and it's almost what I wish Skyward Sword was. I've never really played a game that has this style of, world in the sky with all sorts of old ancient structures and cool devices and like waterfalls and stuff. Like, you've seen things like that in anime, but nothing quite like this in a video game. At least nothing that's coming to mind. I mean, in all honesty, these islands are big enough that like a smaller studio and a medium-ish AA or even just a AAA game could call it a day with just the islands. So the fact that the rest of the map here is included is just massively and somewhat overwhelmingly awesome. I'm somewhat blown away by it. Like, this game seems to take everything I enjoyed about the last game and adds in a lot of things that kind of fill in the gaps. I feel like when the developers were making this game, they're like, how can we make this game as creative and awe-inspiring as possible? Like, how do we extract the creativity out of our players? And that seems to be where everything starts. So even things from the last game like cooking carrying over very much use that kind of creative trial and error process, but then that's taken one step further when it comes to fusing weapons. And the whole weapon fusing system really addresses one of my biggest complaints about the last game, being the durability of weapons. Now, everything still breaks all the time, but it's not nearly as frustrating as Breath of the Wild because you tend to find a lot of junk that's not very valuable, and you tend to fuse junk with somewhat better junk, and then you make really good junk. If something breaks, it never feels like a deal breaker. Versus in the last game, I constantly found myself having, a decent selection of good weapons, but I never wanted to use them in fear of something breaking, and then being screwed later if I actually needed that item. To me, it felt like I wasn't encouraged to use the weapons, but in this it feels like it's quite the opposite, in that use whatever you have and literally anything you have, which is a really nice change of pace. Now you get into the whole creation side of things, where you're making all sorts of MacGyver-esque vehicles from just basic parts. It's a little harder than it looks, as far as at first you're like, I don't know how this is going to work, and there's definitely rules. But once you get the hang of what those rules, or physics are, you really start to have some fun, and you really get to flex those creative muscles and what kind of contraptions you can make. And the nice thing is, you don't have to do any of those things if you don't want to. But if you do, there's a lot of different ways you can flex those muscles. I feel that for me and for many players, the best thing about Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom is that feeling of exploration you get. Like you're truly getting to explore this unforeseen world, at least unforeseen to you. But now that sense of adventure and exploration is dialed up to an 11 with all these new creative options. I mean, the basic gameplay loop is the same. You're still wanting to complete shrines, get those Koroks, I always say Clorox seeds, and then try to, build your inventory, try to get better weapons and increase your hearts. But everything's a little bit different. Nothing you see is the same. The land's a little bit different. There's the whole three-dimensional side of things, of sky islands as well as dungeons and caves. But even things like shrines are different, which kind of takes me to how open this game is. It's refreshing, and it goes back to the whole creative thing where you can approach puzzles almost any way you can think of. Like, there were several times where I completed a shrine or even just traversal where it seemed to me there was some sort of right way that the developers had in mind for you to do it, and the way I was doing it clearly wasn't the right way, but it got the job done. And it just adds to that sense of satisfaction once you actually figure something out, even if it's just a dumb contraption or a really stupid idea that, or you're basically cheesing it. Like, even when you're cheesing it or you're just not very creative, you still feel that sense of creative freedom. It just takes what's already there and makes it better. Now, who is Tears of the Kingdom for? Well, that's a good question. If you loved Breath of the Wild, I would be surprised if you didn't at least like Tears of the Kingdom, at least almost as much as you like Breath of the Wild. If you didn't like Breath of the Wild, then I don't really think this game will do much for you either. Now, the interesting part is if you're someone like me, where if you're in the I liked it but I didn't love the previous title, then it's definitely worth giving a shot. I mean, I think from an overview, taking a look at the new features should be enough of an indicator if it's going a net positive or net negative for you. But for me, I'm definitely enjoying it more than I enjoyed Breath of the Wild. And I've always respected that game, and I have had moments of fun, but it just wasn't as consistently fun as this game is. And I think it's because for me, as someone who's put hundreds of hours into Mario Maker 2, I'm a sucker for messing around and trying to come up with some sort of solution. I like that kind of problem solving. Do you like Tears of the Kingdom? Have you not picked it up yet? Are you gonna pick it up? Is it not for you, or are you kind of in the middle? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, and if you liked the video, please leave me a like. Appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, see ya.